They want to go quick with Hogan to the rack and one. Flush, chucks it up, it's caught! Dagger!
Oh, she's gonna hit the gas. What I want, boom!
Hello and welcome back for Season 2, Episode 6 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Now, I said this last week and I will stick with it. This one is going to come out Thursday evening before the first night of the draft starts. I will not promise on the exact time, but you will see it. You know exactly how this goes. It's the 2025 first round NFL mock draft, all 32 picks. Who is going to change the course of their franchise for the better, the worse, or even the hilarious? I'll work in a couple of trades that would make sense as well. Those are always a crapshoot, but we got to get right into it. The Tennessee Titans have been on the clock. They're probably going to hold on to this. That's their plan, and I think they're going to take Cam Ward, quarterback, Miami. They're sitting tight. The Titans were wrong on Will Levis at quarterback in 2023, and he got worse as a starter this year. They could still go with Abdul Carter, we'll get to him real soon, and then try to trade for Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers or somebody else at quarterback, but I can't see either of them wanting to go to Tennessee. Ward threw an NCAA record 158 touchdowns. He led the nation with 39 last year. He's only about 6'2", 223, which isn't quite huge. It's not the prototypical quarterback build, and he only has 9-inch hands, which is typically sort of a big criticism, but no one's been complaining about the physical traits at all because his arm is way beyond anybody else's in this class. Not a perfect prospect, but as good as Tennessee can get at number 1. With the second overall pick, the Cleveland Browns on the clock, let's go Travis Hunter, athlete out of Colorado. If he can play both ways, on offense and defense, best player available. Dominated both sides of the ball like no one else ever has or probably ever will, and won the Heisman because of it. Their GM, Andrew Berry, just compared Hunter to Shohei Ohtani, saying you obviously get a unicorn if you use him both ways. You better not talk game like that and then trade back, or even worse, pick somebody else here at number 2. Very brief stats on Hunter. Again, won the Heisman Trophy. Also had 96 catches, 1,258 yards, 15 touchdowns, and on defense had 4 interceptions with a pick 6, 11 passes defensed, and a forced fumble. The third overall pick belongs to the Giants right now. They could move as well, but let's have them take Abdul Carter, defensive end, Penn State. Carter becomes the best available player if Hunter goes first or second. The Giants finally have a possible starting quarterback for a year or two with Russell Wilson. They could use a ton of offensive line help or an offensive skill player, but Carter is the best purely defensive player. Average sized at 6'3", 250, but he played linebacker and defensive end. He had 23.5 tackles for a loss last year. That led the nation. 12 sacks last year as well. Good hands, fantastic get-off and first step, and he's only 21 years old. Most pass rushers take a couple years to develop that rush plan, but he doesn't need a great plan if tackles can't even get out of their stance and get hands on him in the first place. Best tape of any defensive player in the class, and he could be a Pro Bowler in year 1 across from Brian Burns with the Giants. The Patriots at pick 4, they're tough to pick here. I'm going to go, boy, this is a tough name, and it has been the entire draft process. Tetairoa McMillan, wide receiver, Arizona. This is very high to take a receiver, I admit, but it's an unusually terrible offense he would be getting into. They were last in passing and 31st in total offense last year. Hunter Henry at tight end led them with 674 yards, and no one caught more than 3 touchdowns. He's a true X receiver with that Brandon Marshall or Mike Evans level size and meanness. That could just change so much in New England. He's 6'5", about 215 right now, and he ran 4.48 at his pro day. He could still put on some weight, and he averaged over 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns the last 2 years. New England's offensive line is also in shambles, but I know there are day 2 and day 3 linemen that can start. I doubt this will actually be their pick, but I'm tired of the Patriots being so incapable of completing a pass beyond 5 yards. I want them to take McMillan. Coming in at number 5, another pick people could see trading hands, the Jaguars, Ashton Jeanty, running back, Boise State. They want Jeanty. In my opinion, I don't think that they need him, but I think he is the best running back prospect since Saquon Barkley. He still probably shouldn't go in the top 10, but I don't see that there's any way that he won't. He's 5'9", 215 pounds, untackleable, and he completely knows it too. He just made an Instagram post about sort of exactly that, saying, well, take the guy that nobody can tackle. He came close to Barry Sanders' NCAA season rushing record, playing against mostly 8- and 9-man boxes. He's mentioned also wanting to go to Dallas, but I don't think he's going to make it that far, and he would almost definitely start right away over Etienne and Tank Bigsby. The Raiders will be on the clock at 6. Will Campbell, offensive tackle, LSU. A classic example of a team with too many holes to fill. They are kind of only set at tight end and maybe defensive line. At least a lot of top 10 offensive linemen will succeed and be able to start for, a decade in the NFL. Nobody likes when their team picks a tackle, but boy, many teams need it. Campbell was the guy that gave the working at Walmart interview, if you saw that quote, and he only gave up 4 sacks in 3 years. They could take a quarterback for Geno Smith to mentor, or a wide receiver to make some splash plays, but offensive tackle is one of the safest long-term plays for any team, especially one this bad. The New York Football Jets will be on the clock at 7. Tyler Warren, tight end, Penn State. Best tight end prospect since Kyle Pitts coming out in 2020. The best matchup piece in the entire draft, hands down. This guy played halfback, quarterback, tight end, slot, receiver, fullback. He probably played offensive coordinator, head coach, cheerleader, you name it. He's 6'5.5". He's 256. Everyone loves him. He has swagger. He was the Mackey Award winner as a top tight end. He was first in the Next Gen Stats production, athleticism, and overall scores. He had 4 rushing touchdowns, caught 104 balls, over 1,200 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns from literally every possible alignment. Best matchup piece. Let me reiterate that. Best possible matchup piece in the entire draft, and that the league has seen arguably in years. Plus, Justin Fields typically finds great connections with tight ends underneath if Fields end up being their starter. Plus, Justin Fields typically finds great connections with tight ends underneath if it is Fields that ends up being their starter. The Panthers are probably relieved to be picking 8th. Usually they're in that 1 to 3 range, but Jalen Walker, linebacker, Georgia. They were last in total defense again. How do they always do that? They were last in rushing defense, and second worst was almost 40 yards a game better than them. Pathetic defensive showing last year. Walker is 6'1", 243. He might have to play off the ball primarily because of that size, whereas he split time between linebacker and edge at Georgia. 11.5 sacks in 2 years as a starter is not elite, but running a 4.5 40 is. Plus, he led all FBS off-ball linebackers last year with 34 pressures, so he was probably a little bit unlucky with the sacks. The fit and the need are both here. Now to the Saints at 9, one of the more difficult ones to call. Let's go Shedeur Sanders, quarterback, Colorado. Love it or hate it, Shedeur is going to go in the first round. New Orleans should probably go offensive tackle, especially since Ryan Ramczyk, a 7-year starter and 3-time All-Pro, just retired last week, but I think they want to be more aggressive. Derek Carr, their starting quarterback on paper, is still a trade candidate. They picked Spencer Rattler in the 5th round last year. He is very unlikely to be the guy, considering his accuracy problems last year when Carr was injured. Shedeur has great accuracy, good enough arm strength. He has been called out by a lot of executives saying his attitude is terrible when he was interviewing at the combine and things, and he's got this air of entitlement. Maybe because he is the son of Deion Sanders. Was anyone not expecting this? He will still be the second quarterback off the board, and if he had a better attitude, maybe he could have been the first, like the early mock drafts thought. Rounding out the top 10, we've got the Bears. Kelvin Banks, offensive tackle, Texas. This is the NFL. At least 3 offensive linemen will go in the top 10. Teams know how important it is to have 2 or more good ones and to spend draft capital on them. This one is 6'5", 315 pounds, and won the Lombardi Award as the nation's top offensive lineman and the Outland Trophy as the best interior lineman, period, whether offense or defense. He's one of those young guys that's a little bit more of a polished run blocker than pass blocker right now. The Bears are not particularly good as a rushing team, but a smart front office would invest a lot in becoming one. They've signed Drew Dahlman at center and Joe Thuney at guard over this offseason. Thuney finished 10th in Offensive Player of the Year voting as an offensive lineman, by the way, one higher spot than Penei Sewell. That is utterly comical, and I couldn't believe that as I was looking it up, but nonetheless, that's true. They've got a young quarterback to protect who they took number 1 overall last year. Do not stop investing in offensive linemen, and they will not stop paying you back. Throwing in the first trade here at 11, this is going to be the Bills from the 49ers, with Buffalo giving up picks number 56 and 62 from the second round and retaining, crucially, their other first-round pick. Mason Graham, defensive lineman, Michigan. First-team All-American, never put up gaudy numbers with Michigan, but always popped off of the tape. He was mostly a 3-tech defensive tackle, and he was on the greatest team in college football history, probably as a sophomore, that team that went undefeated and won the Natty. He's 6'3.5", weighed in at 296 at the combine. He has smaller hands and shorter arms than average, but he has this great wrestling background and an insane motor, one of the absolute best in this whole class. The Bills are still a Super Bowl team. The offense is going to take care of itself. Defensive line depth is one of those things that could get them over the hump. Dallas Cowboys on the clock with pick 12, Armand Membu, offensive tackle, Mizzou. Another team that could list pretty much every position as a need. Membu is 6'4", he's a 332-pound behemoth, 4'9", 140, 31 bench reps, 34-inch vert, one of the physically scariest players coming out this year, and he only gave up 3 sacks in 3 years in college with none his senior year. Animal. Dallas drafted Tyler Guyton, tackle out of Oklahoma last year, and he was graded 115th of 140 tackles last year by Pro Football Focus and had the second most penalties of any lineman in the league last year with 18. They could either move Guyton or their right tackle Terrence Steele inside and play Membu at tackle, or they could play Membu at guard, but either way, he will crush people. Unlucky number 13, but the Dolphins are in a great spot here. Jahdae Barron, cornerback, Texas. This is contingent on Jalen Ramsey being traded. The rumors still seem to suggest that that will happen, but Ramsey would leave a Hall of Fame-sized hole in this secondary. Their top safety, Javon Holland, is now with the Giants, so they have to take a DB regardless. I say, why not do it in the first round? The Dolphins like to move people around, and Barron can play anywhere. I'm guessing that he will, this year, take snaps in the slot, at box safety, deep and outside corner, if not even sub-linebacker. He did that all really well in college, well enough to win the Jim Thorpe Award as the top DB. Then he went out and ran a 4.39 40 with a 1.5 10-yard split. If there weren't so many offensive needs for other teams in the top 10-ish, he'd be good enough to go top 5. Now to the Colts at 14. Some people have even had them mocked as moving up to make this pick because they probably like the guy so much. Colston Loveland, tight end, Michigan. He is not as fast, not as versatile, and just not as good of a player as Tyler Warren, but boy, the gap is not very big. This guy is smart, he gets open, he can stay on the field all 3 downs a little bit easier, and still has some of that positional flexibility. He could line up in the backfield, he could line up at fullback or play some wide receiver if you needed him to. The Colts' leading tight end had literally 182 yards, and they had 2 total touchdowns to the position for the entire year. Every young quarterback needs a go-to guy. The need is huge for a really good tight end. The scheme fit isn't perfect, but if they're going to stick with Anthony Richardson, they're going to have to learn to throw the ball eventually, and Loveland is a guy that could really help Richardson grow. Down to the Atlanta Falcons at pick 15. Let's go Mykel Williams, edge, Georgia. How long has their pass rush been so terrible? since Vic Beasley at least. You guys remember Vic Beasley? This defense last year, 31st in third down percentage. They allowed 45% of those. A guy that I have literally never heard of led them in sacks with 6. I'm going to try on the name here, Arnold Ebiketie. Matt Judon is old. He still rushes the passer pretty well with them, but I believe only came up with 5.5 sacks last year. Mykel Williams is 6'5", 265. He looks the part of an NFL edge rusher, and he still has room to get bigger if he wanted, so they could play him, exclusively as an end. He turns 21 in June. That is insane, and the fit with the Falcons is great. To get us halfway through the first round, we're at number 16. The Cardinals will be on the clock. Matthew Golden, wide receiver, Texas. This guy ran a 4.29 40. Does anything else really matter? He's also a pretty good kick returner. He's 5'11", 191 pounds. Not shocking that he does not have above average size, but that's bigger than Tyreek Hill. We've seen receivers of this size recently dominate. He had 17 yards a catch for his college career. He had 9 touchdowns last year, and it's a really good pairing with a more technical and a little bit bigger receiver like Marvin Harrison Jr., who they took last year. No other receiver for the Cardinals went over 550 yards. Arizona could also use a lineman or two, but they can get one later. They have picks in every round except the 6th. Maybe with Trey McBride, their top tight end, eating underneath, and Golden and Marvin Harrison with the great receiver pairing, Kyler Murray could finally take that next step, lead the Cardinals into the playoffs, and do something. Here we crack into the second half of round 1. The Bengals will be up at 17. Mike Green, edge, Marshall. Most sacks in Division 1 with 17. Trey Hendrickson, the Bengals' leading sack man from last year, as well as a guy who had 34.5 over the last 2 seasons, is still holding out, and he will probably be traded. If Joe Burrow had a capable defense around him, the Bengals might have won 1 or more Super Bowls already, and they cannot waste this guy's prime. Mike Green was 2nd in PFF edge grade. He hit 28 bench reps, had a 4.25 pro agility. That would have been first for all linebackers and defensive linemen. I should note that was at his pro day, and he did not work out at the combine. But he had a really good Senior Bowl performance, and he could easily end up being the best pass rusher this year if Abdul Carter's shoulder injury holds him back at all in the first couple of months. The Seattle Seahawks are picking 18th. Will Johnson, cornerback, Michigan. Seattle loves Devin Witherspoon and Tariq Woolen, their 2 starting corners, but only Witherspoon is signed beyond 2025. Will Johnson was supposed to be the consensus number 1 defensive back and a top 5 pick overall, but he got injured at the halfway point of his junior year, and he missed the rest of the season with turf toe. Then he picked up a hamstring injury that kept him from working out at the combine or the pro day. He was the defensive MVP of the national championship as a sophomore. Again, he was also on that Michigan team that's probably the best team in the history of college football. Still, he managed to come up with 9 interceptions. He scored 3 touchdowns, and he only allowed 2 for his career. Come on. He has great size at 6'2", 195, and this team loves to draft long, tall press corners. See Richard Sherman, who will still probably make the Hall of Fame. If Will Johnson were to never have gotten hurt, he would go way higher. Still, 18th is a good spot for him. Next prospective trade comes in at 19. This is the Ravens acquiring this pick from the Buccaneers, and they also throw in a 5th rounder, pick number 176. Maxwell Hairston, cornerback, Kentucky. 31st ranked pass defense is unacceptable from a John Harbaugh coach team. The number of rookie-type mistakes from everyone in that secondary last year, even good veteran players, was just pitiful. The Ravens are never going to get over their own hump and get to, let alone win, the Super Bowl without upgrading defensively. Funny enough, the Ravens actually chose 2 corners last year. You had Nate Wiggins out of Clemson in the 1st round, and Wiggins was very good. Then also TJ Tampa in the 4th round out of Iowa State. Tampa rarely played, but just as an entire back end, like I said, they have to be better. Hairston gave up no touchdowns, only 12 receptions in 7 games. This is probably more about fit than it is need, but Hairston makes sense. Down to the Broncos at 20th overall, Amarion Hampton, running back, North Carolina. He is, on paper, sort of a number 2 running back, but he could become a number 1 really quickly because the Denver backfield is depleted. He had an elite combine. He ran a 4.4 640, had a 38-inch vert, 10'10" broad jump. They had not a single running back in Denver with more than 8 carries a game. They don't have a clear starter right now. They had nobody over 513 rushing yards. Bo Nix, their rookie quarterback, was 3rd in rushing for them. And Javonte Williams, their top rusher, is now a Cowboy. Their defense is already stacked in Denver. They really don't need to address much about that. Hampton could be one of those rare running backs that goes in the first round. He's probably the second best to Cam Skattebo out of Arizona State. I'm going to pick Hampton ahead of him, but if it were Skattebo at this exact same pick, I wouldn't complain. Moving down to the Steelers at 21. This is conditional. If Aaron Rodgers does choose eventually to go to Pittsburgh, and obviously around draft time would be a great time for it so that everybody knows what they should be planning to do with their draft and the rest of their offseason. If it is Aaron Rodgers, then I think the Steelers are going to go with a defensive tackle, Derek Harmon out of Oregon. If they do not get Aaron Rodgers, I'm going to say Jackson Dart, quarterback, Ole Miss. Cam Hayward is the stalwart on the Steelers' defensive line. He is not retiring until 2026, allegedly. That's at least how long he's under contract. He still needs to get 100 sacks, and he's at 88.5 currently. And this guy, Derek Harmon, has been called the next Cam Hayward. He can play inside or outside just like the old man can. He's 6'4", 310-ish. He ran a 4.9 540, very impressive for a guy of that size. The only issue is a shoulder injury that has allowed him maybe to drop this far in the prospect rankings, but Derek Harmon, absolute stud. If it's Jackson Dart, I think pretty much everybody is in agreement. He is the 3rd most talented quarterback, and again, the Steelers will desperately need a quarterback of some kind. They don't want to rely on something like a trade for Kirk Cousins as well, or trying to hit somebody else in free agency, so Dart will sort of be the default. The Chargers are going to be up at pick 22. I have Harold Fannin Jr., tight end, Bowling Green. He led the entire FBS in yards and receptions. Not just for tight ends, which when I was starting to research this episode is kind of how I thought it was. No, he led all players in the FBS. 117 catches, 1,555 yards. Those were both tight end records all time. He was the MAC Player of the Year, the first tight end ever to win a Conference Player of the Year award. He is kind of stiff. He's a little bit of a funny-looking runner, and he ran a 4.7 140. Weirdly enough, though, his short speed was really good. He had a 1.56 10-yard split, but he benched 22 reps. That's one less than Gronk did at his combine. And like most good receiving tight ends, he's not thought of as much as a blocker. He probably won't contribute much that way in the NFL, but he can play wide receiver to mitigate that. The other tight ends the Chargers have on the roster are Tyler Conklin and Will Dissly. This would be a big upgrade in the receiving department for a team that needs some explosive plays. The host team, the Green Bay Packers, are going to be picking 23rd. Trey Amos, cornerback, Ole Miss. Jair Alexander still needs to go. He's been their top corner for a long time, but he struggled more so last year anyway. They have a great run defense. Under 100 yards a game they allowed last year. They were 13th in passing defense too, pretty solid, 6th in scoring, but they're still going to need help, and they should probably take 2 defensive backs. Even 2 corners would make complete sense. The knocks on Amos are he had a poor vert. He had a 4.4 340, somewhat average for an NFL corner. That's just where the standard is nowadays, kind of crazy. He transferred twice, though, Louisiana to Alabama to Ole Miss, so he ended up getting to play against a ton of NFL caliber receivers. I think he would typically go in the second round, but the Packers' need is just too great. Again, they have to pick a DB of some kind, and this is a good fit. Down at pick 24, I'm going to have the Vikings trading all the way out of the first round. If it sounds like a mistake for Minnesota, entirely possible that it is, but let me tell you the details. The Vikings get Kwity Paye and a second-rounder number 45 for the Colts to move back up into this first round again. Donovan Jackson, offensive tackle, Ohio State is the pick. Quentin Nelson has been holding it down ever since he was drafted. You just expect him at left guard to be an all-pro pretty much every year. Right guard, much bigger question mark. Donovan Jackson started 5 games at left guard, 9 at left tackle to replace their injured starter Josh Simmons, who also has a chance to be a first-round pick himself for the, of course, national champion Ohio State Buckeyes, and ended up being a second-team All-American and first-team All-Big Ten. Really tough to do when you play multiple positions during the season. He's 6'4", 315, long arms, pretty big hands, and could probably start at right guard on day one. This would be a really good way for the Colts to get a lot better in not a lot of time and not have to give up that much as I see it. Kwity Paye not the most impactful edge rusher like he was kind of drafted to be. The Texans are going to be on the clock with pick 25. For them, I'm going with Tyler Booker, offensive guard, Ohio State. Yes, a run on Ohio State linemen. There's a reason they won a national championship. Those guys maul people. And when you look at the Texans, big issues became massive issues when they got to the playoffs. They were eviscerated by the Chiefs' pass rush in that divisional game that they lost with 8 sacks and way too many hits on their quarterback. They have a great young quarterback, by the way, C.J. Stroud. They have stud receivers, but they can't take advantage because he's always getting hit back there. Tyler Booker is 6'5", 325. He's going to be able to play anywhere, but he started mostly at left guard, and he always played against other NFL players. Plus, maybe the biggest thing that sets him ahead from some of the other guys who could be in the first round as well is people say he's one of the best locker room guys and leaders in this entire class. Seriously, there's going to be a whole bunch of linemen in this first round. Let's get another one to the Rams at 26. Josh Connerly Jr., offensive tackle, Oregon. The Rams are another loaded offense on paper that often can't do what they want to do because their protection breaks down. They re-signed Matt Stafford, Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams are ready to be an awesome tandem at wide receiver, but they gave up the second fastest average time to sack and the third fewest yards after contact per run with a running back, Kyren Williams, who had almost 1,300 yards rushing. Offensive line, through all those many metrics you can piece together, just was not good enough. Connerly ran a 5.05 40 at 6'5", 311, plenty good enough. He was a third-team All-American and a finalist for the nation's top offensive lineman. He could either sit behind 32-year-old Rob Havenstein until he retires and then come in and start right away, or he could work in at guard from day one of camp. Either are pretty good options. Down to pick 27. This was the one that we had the Ravens and Bucks making a swap for, so this will be the Buccaneers pick now. Jihad Campbell, linebacker, Alabama. We start with the physicals for him, 4'5", 40, 6'3", 235, so he's one of the only true off-ball, four-down linebackers that people are really excited about that will be going in this first round. He was first-team All-SEC, 117 tackles last year, 11.5 tackles for loss from an off-ball linebacker. That's really impressive, and 5 sacks as well. He's only a junior, 21 years old, and he could easily gain 15 pounds to help against the run. The Bucks had a 29th ranked passing defense. It would be nice for him to contribute a little bit as an off-ball linebacker in the pass rush game too, but in coverage he'll still provide a lot of value. Kalijah Cansey with 7.5 and Vita Vea with 7 led them in sacks. Those guys are both defensive tackles. You'd really love to find somebody that can create something off of the edge too. Campbell could even become a true Mike backer. Like everybody out of Alabama, he's got the size and the physicality and the attitude for it. Now we're getting real close. We're down to pick 28, and the Lions will be on the clock here. It's tough to see them not moving up at all, but I think maybe the first round they'll sit, see where some other guys go on their board and things, and then the next couple of rounds really start to play some chess moves. At 28, Detroit Lions pick Shamar Stewart, edge, Texas A&M. Again, totally unshocked if they swing a trade, but what do they need to move up for? I'm tempted to say nothing. They still 100% need a running mate on the edge for Aiden Hutchinson. Marcus Davenport has been there. He came over from the Saints a couple of years ago, but he probably won't cut it. He's only played what could be qualified as a full season once out of 8. Every elite edge player looks even better when they have someone competent opposite them. Stewart is a rare case of a physical freak with very little college production. He had 4.5 sacks, 11 tackles for loss in 3 years, but only one was as a starter. He will 100% be a project, a developmental case, but the Lions are good enough to take that on. He's 6'5", 267. He ran a 4.59 40, had a 40-inch vert and a 10.11 broad jump. The combine isn't everything, but his was hyper elite. All those physical tools make you think, yeah, he could be on the other side of Aiden Hutchinson and be just fine. Speaking of freaks, the Commanders at 29. They are known to like freaks, so let's give him another one. James Pierce Jr., edge, Tennessee. 6'5", 245, and he should play both linebacker and defensive end, probably situationally, but will be fine at either. He does need to get stronger against the run, but the Commanders playing a base 4-3 really helps the fit. He had 11.5 sacks his last 2 years in college, and he doesn't turn 22 till October either. He's a fairly young guy. Plus, their top edge rusher, Dante Fowler, had 10.5 sacks and is now on the Cowboys. Great fit, great need for a very good team that should be right in the middle of their Super Bowl window, thanks to Jaden Daniels, probably the best rookie quarterback ever. Just 3 more picks to get through. The Bills are on the clock at 30. Siobhan Revel Jr., cornerback, East Carolina. Another team that I have picking twice in the first round, them and the Colts. This kind of aggression is how you win a Super Bowl in a 1-year, really targeted effort. The Eagles have been doing it for several years. They absolutely nailed it this year and completely embarrassed the Chiefs. Buffalo has 10 draft picks initially, and they do not need 10 draft picks. I think they need a few big hits. Speaking of, Revel is one of the most capable tackling DBs in this draft, and like most tall corners with really long arms, is great in press man too. The big issue with him is he tore his ACL in September after only 3 games. He may not be available for a chunk of this year, but I see this as someone who could eventually help to keep the Bills' Super Bowl window open too. The question will be, was he playing against a bunch of NFL talent at East Carolina? The answer, of course, will be no, but the film is pretty good. The advanced numbers were okay, and he could still be developed to be one of the top corners in this draft. The Bills, like the Lions, have the ability to take on a couple of projects, especially with this many picks. The Super Bowl runners-up at 31, the Kansas City Chiefs. Most people have said O-line for them. I'm going to say D-line, Walter Nolan, defensive tackle, Ole Miss. It was a 4th-ranked scoring and an 8th-ranked rushing defense that really carried KC to 15 wins this year. Chris Jones is the best defensive tackle in football, has been for a while now, but he held out in 2023 looking for a contract extension, and he's going to be heading into year 10. There's always room for more big, quick defensive tackles who can rush from inside or outside. Just like the Bills, defensive line depth could be the thing to extend their Super Bowl window. Nolan had 11.5 sacks in 3 years in college. He had 14 TFLs last year as a defensive tackle, and he led the best run defense in the nation too. He didn't work out at the Combine or at his pro day, but his history of winning up front against SEC offensive linemen, most of whom will be in the NFL with him, is all you need to know. He could plug and play right away. Then that gives Chris Jones even more freedom to line up wherever he wants, like he always does, and get the best possible matchups for himself. If the Chiefs do pick an offensive tackle, though, I will give them just as much credit for shoring up their needs. And for the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, pick 32 of the first round, people have speculated, are they even going to move up and do something dramatic, or would they move back? I am going to say no for now. The Eagles pick Malachi Starks, safety, Georgia. It is annoying that this team has so few holes after just winning the Super Bowl. Tristan McCollum was a guy that they drafted last year. He played a lot of free safety, and he was one of the guys that struggled on, of course, a very good defense. He was graded 155th of 171 qualified safeties by Pro Football Focus. They took two incredible rookie corners, Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell last year. We all know how that worked out. DeJean, of course, with a pick 6 in the Super Bowl. Why not keep loading up on good young DBs? Malachi Starks has kind of average physical stats. He's 6'1", about 195, ran a 4.5 flat 40, 33-inch vert, not so great, right? But he could play nickel, he could play free safety, box safety, even corner if necessary. This is a pick for the future, and if it paid off anything up front, then that's house money. And are you not entertained? That is all 32 picks in my NFL first-round mock draft. There's no way to do this super quickly or succinctly and to do it justice. You have to dive into the numbers. There's 1,000,001 tiny little inputs that all contribute to how high a player will go, what teams want them, who trades what picks when, and even then, plenty of picks won't turn out at all. That's why the draft as an event is so awesome to me, the level of risk to so many of these picks. I do really hope you enjoyed and got a little bit nerdy with me. I'll do a quick stat rundown next week of how I did last year and, of course, more importantly, how I fared this year. I feel incredibly confident about the top 3. Boy, beyond those 3 picks, I could throw some darts sometimes, but again, I did my best considering what teams need, what the fits are, who the players are that might fall, this, that, and the other thing. That is football, you know what I mean? Do all the things with the socials, like, comment, share, good deal. This has been Season 2, Episode 6 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Thanks for joining me. They want to go quick with Hogan to the rack and one! Flush, chucks it up, it's caught! Dagger!
She's gonna hit the gas. It's what I want, boom!